Greetings, everyone. It is the 16th of April, and this is the People-Centered Internet Forum. We're delighted to have you with us. Today, we are delighted to have Nele Leosk with us, all right, as our guest. Nele joins us from Estonia at the end of a workday, and we can see the light filtering in, right, very much at an angle, right? And Nele, delighted to have you with us. We want to, hear from your perspective as, the head of digital diplomacy, which is a very interesting title, right, to have. All right, I don't know that how many colleagues you have that have a similar title around the world, and you also are the host. This is something that Mei-Lin asked me to participate in as a co-founder of PCI, the Digital Democracy Forum. So we'd like to hear a little bit about you, your background, and what led to this unique opportunity for you to, be in the position that you're in. I see Mei-Lin has joined us. So before we jump in, right, to your comments and remarks, Mei-Lin, I would ask that you share a few thoughts about your collaboration with Nele over the years, and then we'll get to her remarks. Mei-Lin.
Yes, sorry everyone that I'm late, but it's a delight. Just the correction, it's not the Digital Democracy Forum, it's called the Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy Network.
All right, thank you.
And Nele took over from Vint Cerf. I think we were both very pleased. Vint Cerf was the founding chair of this forum, and she has just been the most fabulous collaborator I could ever have imagined. Better in all respects that I could have expected. Nele and I just think alike about a lot of things. It's just a marvelous thing to find. And I respect her intellect, her diplomatic skills, her ability to see the future and then translate it into practical terms for what to do today. I'm proud and honored to be a friend of Nele Leosk. And so I am delighted you all get to know her better. Over to you, Nele.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everybody, for accepting me here today. As was already said, I'm Nele, and I come from Estonia, and I'm Estonia's digital ambassador. And it's evening here after my work day, and it's one of these very rare occasions when I am at home and my partner is not, which means that I have kids around that may occasionally pop up in the screen. But I do not let this bother myself, and I hope it doesn't bother you also. I think it was a time during COVID when we actually got quite used to it, but this is past, at least for now. But as Mei-Lin so generously started, I do have to concur and say that it has also been a pleasure for me, even though chairing the Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy Network has been quite challenging and mainly because I took over from Vint Cerf, which put quite a bit of a pressure for me, and for the first times I was also wondering whether it was such a good idea. But I am glad that I did take that role. But I will perhaps come to the reasons a bit later when I get to that stage of my life story and my current position and the reasons for, let's say, widening the scope where I am, or the network where I'm currently involved. But it was actually just a few days ago when I gave an interview to Estonia Briefing Center. It's a center in Estonia that was established around 2010, 2011 to, I would say, synthesize and analyze what Estonia had done in digitalization. I do not know how many of you know Estonia. It's often referred to as e-Estonia, and I think Estonia is an important, and I would say increasingly important, reminder to all of us of everything good that digital technologies can bring along. Because increasingly we see that this focus has actually shifted to everything bad that also comes, unfortunately, with digital technologies and the developments, and increasingly so. So I was giving this interview a few days back, and I had to go back into my history, and surprisingly, I found out that I have been in the area already for 22 years. It was around 2000 when I entered the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, and I do not know whether Meilin knows it, but I actually was mainly involved in the energy sector. So I was responsible for the harmonization of some European directives related to low voltage electromagnetic compatibility and many other things in this area. But it happened to be the same ministry that is responsible for digitalization, was then and is now. And I simply had a very good, I would say, a friendly relationship with my colleagues from this department, who alluded to me to a new emerging field of then referred to as e-government or e-governance, but we have seen many other terms popping up now and then. And I have to admit, I didn't know that much about technologies, but it sounded fascinating. And I then decided to enter e-governance academy. That is still one of the main think tanks, and I would say also consulting centers in Estonia. And I was building several programs around digitalization, on democracy, on education, later on government architecture, and so forth. And it was fascinating for me, as then quite a young individual still, to explore these different places, different countries, their issues in digitalization. And I came to realize that coming, let's say, from, I was born still in the time when there was such a union, a Soviet Union. And we were always of the opinion that bureaucracy and all the problems we had were very unique to that particular system. Later, going around, I realized that it was actually not so. These bureaucratic burdens and difficulties that come with, let's say, institutionalized governance are actually quite similar around the globe. It is just the approaches and ways, and of course the scale in which we approach these issues that we have in our societies that are very different. And I have to say that Estonia was very lucky, not only because it had a very stable government, I would say a peaceful switch from one society or one order to another. I did work also for 6 years in Estonian police at the beginning of 90s, and I can tell you it was a time I would not like to return to, because building a state can be a very fragile process that can go in, can very quickly go in many ways. But for Estonia, it turned out, and I am really proud to say that digital technologies played a huge role in Estonia's state building, and it really brought belief in Estonia of the possibility of becoming an innovative, modern, economically well-to-do, truly democratic state. It is currently, but it was already 20 years ago, and later in my life, working with so many different governments, when I realized that we are perhaps not in the majority with these developments, but rather in minority. And I think in the current year we are currently living, we see that clearly that there are a lot more people living under autocratic regimes than democratic. And what I have experienced here, or at some time thought was quite natural to have, was actually not that natural at all. But everything comes to an end, and I don't want to actually talk so much about myself, but move actually to the topic where I'm currently involved. But I believe it has made me the digital diplomat I am in this very moment. From e-governance academy, I shifted more to academia and then to private sector, and worked a lot in international organizations. And for the past 4 years before moving back to Estonia, I was actually working in Lisbon, but for several reasons, Estonia's government had a position opened for the ambassador of digital affairs, and I have to say it's quite rare. I do not know any other ambassador level person in opposition in my ministry where the person has not gone through diplomatic career or at least public sector career in Estonia, because often we have people from Ministry of Defense or perhaps some other areas. And I think the reason was very simple. The ministry really wanted a diplomat that is knowledgeable in technology issues. We can see many countries taking technology diplomats from outside, mainly because of the same reason. But more and more, I would say that tech diplomacy or digital diplomacy or cyber diplomacy, sometimes they are synonyms, sometimes there are differences. It has become very rooted in our foreign politics, and has become very rooted for very many rather obvious reasons that I'm sure all of you know. And I'm giving now perhaps a small country's perspective, and the country that has been situated at the core of these digital developments. We have internet voting. We can conduct our life fully in digital. We are really used to a digital life. When I was abroad, living, doing my PhD and working in different organizations, I could really continue my life as being in Estonia. And I have to admit, I hugely appreciated it. Digital signature that is equivalent in Estonia to handwritten signature gave me a lot of possibilities. I sold my car, I rented my apartment, I signed all the contracts I needed to. I voted in local elections, national elections, European elections. So I could follow the public hearings of my city government. I could follow legislative making and also comment these on equal terms to other ministries or other public organizations. But I have to say that this is not that obvious or that evident any longer. And there are a lot of challenges also for a small country. And from, let's say, from my country's perspective, it is quite a bit related still to innovation, being able to experiment with new technologies, being able to be brave about it, and being able also to take risks. I think this is something we often forget, that in order to succeed, no matter what area, all of us need to take risks. Not only politicians or governments, but also we as individuals. So I would say that having this constant capacity, knowledge, skills about technological changes has become very crucial for Estonia. And you are in Palo Alto and in the area and maybe also abroad, you are situated in the middle of these technological developments, whereas we here in Estonia are not. We have, of course, some innovations. Skype was founded here, but generally we have been mainly good adopters of these technological changes. And the second is an interrelated reasons when we look at, let's say now from the innovation side, and it's related to dependencies. We are increasingly dependent also on big technology companies, but not only. You may not know, but for example, there is no Siri support for Estonian language and so forth. Now, with the vast developments of machine learning, open AI, small language communities and countries are in a very disadvantaged position here. So we really need to actually, for very practical reasons, cooperate more and more with the private sector that may or may not actually follow some of these democratic principles in their work, or may not also be willing to collaborate because their work perhaps or their business is driven mainly by revenues and increasing incomes. So this, I would say, is more of the practical side of let's say, Estonia's involvement in, let's say, this global technology space. But the main reason for my position, and I am the third digital ambassador actually for Estonia, the main reason, apart from what I just mentioned, was actually e-Estonia itself. So it really was the ability to be visible globally, promote what Estonia has been doing, to spread our approaches to digitalization, our values, but also our solutions. So we had quite a bit of a focus on development cooperation, but also economic policy and economic interests, if you may. And we also had a cyber ambassador, and our cyber ambassador was really had a big department also, and it was involved. I would say the darker sides of technologies, cyber attacks, and so forth. And Estonia was also a country that took cyber issues to the United Nations Security Council. So we had a say also in bringing these issues into the global agenda. So I was more in this brighter position, but I think quite clearly, very quickly, what became evident was that this innovation space or economic space, everything that technologies can bring in, also started to have these darker sides, or I would say gray areas. And I know that many of you have been involved or have followed internet governance issues. But increasingly, we have these questions: how to govern technology, because technology does not recognize borders, and as I was referring to, it brings quite many good things. Globalization, everybody can actually, at least in theory, have an opportunity here, and Estonia is a good reminder or example that it can be materialized also. So it's not really only the talk that we can all benefit from, but it does bring risks. And it is, I'm also, I would say, I have to agree that it's not only the matter of Estonia having a good legal framework, or it's not only the EU having the right principles it follows and the legal framework, and it's also true that, let's say, Europe's sort of developments in data protection, regulating AI, regulating big tech platforms and so forth, has paved a way. And I would say maybe an example for many to follow, because there are still 27 countries. We are not that similar. So 27 countries have debated over these pieces of legislation, over the issues at stake. So it cannot be totally bad that has come out of this process, considering we have differences and we have also all our own interests still. But now is a question how to approach these things globally. And this takes most of my work. I would say I would like to do more talking about my country and what my country does, which is the most pleasurable part of my work. I do have to admit, going to these interesting places, meeting new people, and sharing my views and stories. But what increasingly unites tech diplomats, digital diplomats, is the work that is currently ongoing. All the processes around internet governance, as you know, we are entering IGF, VCs, we are looking ways how to better govern internet. I would say quite a bit is on stake. It seems that our multi-stakeholder-based approach is not so certain to be continued. I hope it will, but there are many signs that it is going more and more towards, I would say, multilateral decision-making, which means that it becomes more an issue of states and less actually all those whom these processes also affect. But apart from internet governance, and I know that I've been talking quite a bit, apart from internet governance, there is of course a question of many other technology governance issues, data governance, how we share data across borders, how perhaps we do it globally. There are quite many issues around AI governance, and I do not know how many of you are aware or follow. There was a tech envoy, UN tech envoy established. I believe he started last year. There is a global digital compact process. It consists of 8 different parts. The aim is by September, during the high-level week of UN General Assembly, to adopt the principles within the framework of the Conference of the Future and the Pact of the Future. And I was before we were talking with Kevin also, what I see happening with these processes is that I see less and less stakeholders actually having a say and actually being present. And every time I go to an event on these topics, I tend to meet one and the same stakeholders, one and the same people even, which shows that the circle is actually quite narrow. It could be very well that these processes do not yet affect us, or they may not affect us, but we cannot be certain of it. And I believe that in many areas, we also do not exactly know how these, I would say, waves or journeys that are being undertaken in different organizations, how they will actually affect us, how they will affect our companies, our economies, and also our security. So there is quite a bit of uncertainty, but I would say it's a very crucial moment of time. So on the one hand, of course, it's evident that we need to act with the spread of disinformation and all the harms and everything that comes along. On the other hand, we have to make sure that we are still brave in adopting these technologies, because I really like my Danish colleagues' remarks that or statements that she has never seen a play being won by a referee. So we cannot rely only on on regulations and different principles and frameworks. We really have to be on top of things. And in all these sort of talks and developments, and it's always, when I look even at the media, we tend to like to talk about everything that can go wrong. And this will ultimately also influence public trust and public opinion on these digital developments. And I would say that these issues have not been very political, at least when I look at my country, it has not been at the core of politics. So it has not been a very polarized issue. I would say that Estonian society has commonly agreed that digitalization is for common good, not a common harm. But we also do not know how it is moving or where it will take us. And I believe that the work that Mail-in does, that the people said that internet does, everybody that is participating in the digital cooperation and democracy meeting, and I believe everybody in this call actually has a role in making sure that we still have this possibility to believe in the good that comes with the internet and technologies, and can also use it. So I think this is my call also for everybody in this call. And whenever I am chairing the DCD network meeting, I'm always amazed actually by many cool and positive things that people around the globe are doing. So I am quite optimistic here. So thank you.
Nele,
Thank you.
thank you. I would like to respond. I think I do it on a personal basis, because this is what has actually, I feel, maybe I've never articulated it. But Nele and I live in frontier towns on the digital frontier. Not just Palo Alto for me, but the similarity for the resonance that I have for Nele is because I grew up in Singapore, which is another frontier town. And what happens with these frontier towns is that you're kind of in the future. And it's actually very difficult for the people who aren't in the future to understand what it's like to live in the future. And I'm struck by the story, Nele, about how you thought that bureaucracy was a product of the Soviet Union. I mean, I think that's a kind of good attitude, right? We don't have to have it. We want something different. And a kind of thing like that happened in Singapore. It wasn't that bureaucracy, but there was a feeling like, oh, the British masters were just taking all the benefits of Singapore for Britain. And what would happen if we actually tried to work the benefits of Singapore for the people of Singapore? And so both Singapore and Estonia had this common thing about, okay, we're fighting against something, and therefore we must achieve it. And because of that, that actually pole vaulted us into the future in a new kind of way that allowed us to kind of invent stuff that was just needed. If you're going to do something like that, you just do it. So this resonance has made us really allies in this. How do we help other communities move into the future? And I think, I mean, my vision for Nele is for far more than being the Estonian tech envoy, but a future envoy for the world. And I think that this is so important because it's very difficult for communities who are struggling with their day-to-day troubles to know what's a possible destination. And if you haven't sort of been there, you can't describe it. And I think Nele actually can and does on a day-to-day basis. So I just wanted to say how important this is. I mentioned in the chat that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is the first electrical engineer to be Secretary General of the UN. And yes, the UN is the referee, but there are many, many organizations in the fight, in the competition. And I think that I see the Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy Forum and Network. It was put together because Vint Cerf said it was necessary. The UN said, the person who organized this digital cooperation thing was Fabrizio Hochschild. And he and I met privately, and he said, we need an outside organization that brings people together outside of the usual suspects, which is what she's saying has happened. The Global Digital Compact, it's the same voices, the same people. But what Vint said is that for the internet, he saw it as a gathering of people who could see the future. And he ended up being a catalyst that connected people across from different institutions. He said, Malin, don't try to get MOUs signed. It's the people, the individual people who see the future, who you need to gather together. And that's why we have the Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy Network. Now, DCD has been kept separate from PCI for a number of years, and this community call allows us to say that if you actually want to put cooperation at the top of your agenda, if you want to cooperate with others to kind of get to the frontier, and however each organization and community and country want to get to the frontier, then be part of DCD. But don't be part of DCD. I said this in the last call. You can't ride DCD to your destination. It's not a horse that you can ride to where you want to go. DCD are fellow travelers moving towards the frontier, helping each other, looking for ways in which we can advance each other's causes because each of us advance each other's causes. So that's the spirit of DCD. And I think partly Nele and I almost don't need to talk about it because we know that that's what it takes. Beyond this kind of dangerous frontier, you have to have friends, you have to help each other. So these are the thoughts that come to mind when I hear what Nele says. So Nele, there is so much you have to give. And what can you see that PCI's community, DCD, could do to help move forward in kind of an agenda of a better world that digital could enable?
So you asked me a question, right? Very difficult.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I should have expected that already. I think it's a matter of awareness, but often it's not only about awareness. It is actually also about ambition, and I have actually a very and maybe this parallel is not relevant, but I have to still share this because I was actually a bit surprised when I heard it. So last week there was a presentation in Estonia. It was a very important study made on the implication of AI for Estonia's economy. It was done in cooperation with some global consulting firm and global tech company and many others. And the surprise there was that they compared countries that have advantage in adopting new technologies and winning from this adoption. They had made a selection. And surprisingly, Estonian companies out of those countries that were chosen, first of all, didn't see the value, but even if they saw the value, they were not willing to make as many investments as their neighbors. And it was not because of the funding or let's say the need for the resources they didn't have, but it was more related to, I wouldn't like to say comfort, but partly because of the comfort, because their life at that very moment, or in this very moment, or these companies that are in the business, they saw that their life is quite good. You know, they have everything in order, so they really didn't see a reason to make an additional effort. And I think this is often the case also with also with individuals. We don't see the reason of making the additional effort, or we might even believe that perhaps not that much is dependent on us because it will anyway be somebody else doing these things or deciding for things. But I believe that individuals or companies or whoever the people in this community represent are actually equipped with necessary skills and other resources to make this additional effort and come out perhaps this zone that we are in our everyday lives. And I know that very well how much I personally struggle also sometimes coming home after a long day and I am thinking, oh, but I still have that call. But I do that call. Actually, at the end of every call, I come out with an understanding that I have also gained something, not by sharing, but also by listening to the others. I do have to admit I do not know much of the details or background of the people in the community. So, but I hope it at least applies to the part of it or the portion to the portion of it.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Maitland, while I still have you on camera, you just recently published a paper on data cooperatives with other. Perhaps you could just share a little bit about that because it's very much related to some of the comments that Nele made. You're on mute, Maitland.
Thank you. So as part of the Italian G7, there's a process called the Think 7, which is for think tanks to submit policy papers. And partly because of the long history of the digital cooperation and diplomacy network, we started in March of 2020. We've had monthly meetings since, thanks to Schneider for very ably organizing it. We realize that if you actually want digital cooperation, you have to have data. And so the question comes up, how to organize this data in a way that doesn't lead to state surveillance or corporate surveillance? How do you organize data for digital cooperation? And the word cooperation led us to the name cooperatives. How can people form cooperatives in which they share their data and allow that data to be used to make the case for what they want and need? Because so often you hear ordinary citizens saying, why isn't anybody addressing the dire needs, the important issues that I care about? And I think in a data-driven age, it's because there isn't the data at the local level. So the local needs are ignored because the data is purely anecdotal. So we actually joined forces with the social cooperative movement in Italy. Italy is the president of the G7. Yasha Stein is the lead author. Yasha Stein is our executive chair of People-Centered Internet. He's the lead author, and we joined forces with two leading intellectuals in Italy to make the case that Italy within the G7 could put forward the importance of social cooperatives having a data layer, data cooperatives. This has been highly embraced by the Italians, which is why our paper was both selected, but we've been invited to give a talk in order to see how this concept could actually move into the G7 discussions as Italy's contribution. Because what I see from the Silicon Valley is that Europe has been playing catch up and looking at, oh, there's this problem, we need to solve that problem, there's that problem. But to really go into the future, you have to think about what benefits people and planet and put that forward. And we really applaud the Italians for realizing that something that's fundamental to their culture, the idea of social cooperatives, could actually help Europe take a leadership role. And they adopted our paper and put some of their best people on it with us in order to actually do that.
Thank you, Maylen, for sharing that. So, Nele, I'm going to go back, all right, to one of the things we talked about before the camera started to roll and we started to, formally record this. What is the genesis of the e-citizenship that Estonia offers? Because it's really unique, right? I don't know whether you were involved in that or influenced it or, but, you should explain that because I'm not sure that everybody really understands or isn't even aware, right, that Estonia offers this.
Yes, so we now go to, for me, to easier questions.
Okay.
But it's actually called e-residency.
E-residency, okay.
E-residency. And
Okay.
I do have to admit I cannot take the full glory for this initiative. But I also have to say that not also all those people that perhaps currently do, because it's actually a rather old possibility of Estonia, and it really started from a practical need, because in Estonia, every person has a digital identity that consists of digital authentication and signature. But what then happened to emerge was that public sector institutions had also clients, let's say tax authority, vehicles authority, and so many other business registry and so forth. They needed also to authenticate foreign citizens to do normal business without them having to come to Estonia, and also without then the authority having different applicative processes. So it was also, let's say, a cost saving also for the government. So I believe it was already in 2006 in our digital strategy that said that Estonia will start to issue virtual residency also to those people that are not Estonian citizens, no Estonian residents, because also residents are entitled to EID. And since 2009, the Identity Documents Act was changed or amended. So everybody in this call who wants to become a virtual citizen of Estonia can do so, presuming you pass some checks. But the idea was really to, let's say, support. It was, let's say, more economic incentive so that people would have Estonia's bureaucracy is rather easy. We have a very good tax system. We have very little reporting requirement. The taxes are pre-filled. The company taxes are soon going to be based on real-time economy. So it's I would say it's quite convenient. And they have done some studies that it has also worked out. But I do have to admit that it was also packaged, but I think it was mainly packaged for the outside world as e-residency, I believe, only in 2011. So it has also this element. Estonia is also under pressure of maintaining its position as a global player in this area. But there are some. So this is an initiative where Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs was not that involved, even though we are involved heavily now, because these e-residency cards are actually issued through our embassy and representations. But we have I would say, another initiative that perhaps was not that high in the agenda of many other governments than it is now, and that concerns data embassy. I'm not sure whether you have heard. Estonian government hosts its data not in the private sector provided cloud, but it hosts its data or keeps its data in the territory of another country. There were negotiations with some countries, but currently we are keeping some of our data in the Luxembourg. So we have a collaboration project. It has turned out to be quite, I would say, it's in a way a business for those countries that provide these services. So they have this highest tier security data sort of centers. So it's not only Luxembourg providing this service, but also Austria. And it had some security considerations behind it also. And we can see now that that not all of it was not entirely out of the blue. And there is quite a bit of interest from countries that are, let's say, not in a favorable geographic position, but actually increasingly by international organizations who collect data and need to host data, let's say humanitarian organizations, and need to host it. And they are looking ways also to, or alternatives to private sector providers for different reasons.
All right, very good. And then I'm going to go to other folks' questions, but I am curious. You were concerned about vitality. What I would generally say as, you're seeing the same people. How would you imagine creating more vitality, right, in the areas that you're, getting new people, to potentially want to join, right? What you're doing, what May-Lin described, right? What is the catalyst, right, for creating that awareness, right? So that another generation starts to be interested in this pursuit. What do you think?
I wouldn't say that there is no interest. Perhaps there is even an interest. Sometimes there is no time and so forth. But I would again bring a parallel with my own current position, which we didn't manage so much to talk. Is actually the practicalities of my everyday life. So we have a very small team. We are 6 people, and we have digital and cyber diplomacy unit. As I was referring to before, we had a digital, let's say, in the brighter side, economic side, innovation side, opportunities, innovation partnerships, and so forth, trade. And cyber was dealing with everything that could potentially go wrong. But now we have merged. We have a digital and cyber diplomacy unit, and I am responsible for the digital side of it. But we are only 6 for 2 different, let's say, lines of work. So I would have to say that for me, it has been a necessity to collaborate. I simply could not survive in any other in any other way, because I simply do not have resources to hire somebody when I need an expert opinion, no matter what area, from open source license policies to the use of AI in automated weapons. So this spectrum is very wide. It's also wide in our ministry. So I simply need to engage as many people as I possibly can and as I possibly know. So I think this is one way of really starting bringing, let's say, more people on board, simply by meeting and talking and so forth. But also the not always, as I said, it's not easy to break through, because once the network is created, I think it's just a human nature also to be a little bit comfortable. So, but I would still say that this awareness of the issues at stake has risen, and has risen also because some big players do pay attention. For example, the European Union even. I would say that they played a role, definitely in the globe, of bringing awareness to the globe around privacy issues, for example, or even small players, Estonia, bringing security issues to United Nations Security Council, where cyber was not really seen as a threat to our national security. So I wouldn't say that it's also so dark.
All right, very good. I'm going to in this order, I'm going to call on Coco and then Mark Prensky to join us. They made some comments in chat. Coco, where do we find you today?
Thank you so much. Coco is in Kigali. I'm in Kigali, Rwanda.
So you put a comment here in chat.
Yes.
Say more to Nele. Ask a question, please.
Exactly. First of all, I say congratulations to Mrs. Nele and all the team. So this subject, this is very wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, I cannot say especially wonderful for us, country which really need to go deep and which search a very fast way for development. And keeping in our heart that technologies, internet, information technologies is the right way to boost economies, boost securities, boost social life development. If just we take the example of three Baltic republics, the three Baltic republic was developed much by the technologies down the mineral, like what we think in Central Africa. We have large continents, we have many minerals, and we think that all our development will come just from minerals, which is not true. But for this, I think that to succeed the digital cooperation and diplomacy, that's a real this topic. We may need to develop fast our countries to share the right information. And if we think a real cooperation between society, in social class, we really need not we need, it's a digital world. And the digital world, the technology is borderless, which means the digital world is borderless. And if it's borderless, we remember that last 5 or 6 years, according to the development of our information system in our countries, we had access to e-passport. I remember last 4 years, last 5 years, when I get my e-passport, and then I ask, is it the e-passport for e-countries? For e-world? No, it's just a digitalization. But now I can understand from this topic that we need to have e-countries, e-embassies, e-societies. That's where I go now. And that's where I have to push my countries. That's where I have to push my countries. If today or tomorrow I will have an opportunity to discuss with key players of key decision maker of the country, this is what I have to put on the table. And I think I will not be wrong. So thank you very much, Mrs. Nellis. If you agree for the team to keep in touch with you, especially me, for some guidance, because really I know that your country is somehow developing in that matters. So thank you very much for the team to give me this opportunity to explain my thinking.
Thank you, Coco. Nele, any reaction to Coco's remarks?
Yes, maybe I will just summarize something that you said actually about the collaboration and the borderless of digital. And maybe refer to some of the trends that have emerged here. I believe after like 20 or 30 years into this digital development, we actually came to realize that some of our needs and some of our problems, but also some of our solutions to these problems are actually quite common. And this is sort of given rise, and I'm sure that many of you know these terms or have noticed these terms like digital public infrastructure, digital public goods, and digital commons, that really refers to, let's say, this co-creation, sharing, and reuse of digital components. And Estonia is one of these reference countries here, because this is how it actually started. Why Estonia managed to do it is that in the early 2000s, Estonia realized that all our public organizations started to have similar developments around data sharing, also digital identity, and so forth. And then we decided to have one, and this is used both by public and private sectors. So our ID card is used for authentication, also in bank services, water, electricity, in the stores as a loyalty card, and so forth. But these extended borders for Estonia. And for example, one of these solutions that Estonia is providing to the world, the data interoperability solution X-Road, is currently not being developed only by Estonia, but also by Finland, Iceland, and also Faroe Islands, that equally to contribute it. And what I, in this sense, perhaps want to say is that this borderless has really given an opportunity to reuse some of what already exists. Of course, understanding that technology or the solutions themselves only make a tiny portion of building a digital society, but it has really given us an opportunity or a need to collaborate over certain similar opportunities, like the example of developing X-Road together with Finland and Iceland, but also to cooperate around certain issues that we all share. I have to admit that, yes, Estonia's example has been, let's say, on EID or data sharing, has been a role model in some time for the EU, let's say the Interoperability Act and the EIDAS, which is the EID sort of framework. But there are so many things we could not have done alone. Let's say the regulation of big platforms, the current AI Act. And here I see also, I guess, some need for a stronger regional cooperation also for other parts of the world, not only the European Union that has organized itself quite well, but for example, Western, Eastern Africa, Latin America, Asian countries that also can come together and discuss these borderless issues together.
So I want to just point out, we're at the end of our first hour together. This is what is allocated for our normal meeting, but we have a half hour of additional questions and overtime for those of you who would like to stay. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this very insightful hour with Nele Leosk, and we'll now continue into our traditional overtime. Right? Thank you for staying with us, Nele. I said that I was going to go to Mark, but Malin has asked a question, so I'm going to ask you that question, and then we'll go to Mark Prensky. Malin wants me to ask you about X-Road, right? I don't know what X-Road is, so please explain that, and then we will go to Mark.
Okay. X-Road is an open source, free to use, scalable, adoptable solution that has been used for the past 25 years almost. Let's say in Estonia, as a platform for enabling data exchange between different databases and information systems, not only within government organizations, but also between government and private sector institutions. And it is in Estonia used for in public sector for 100% of data exchange, but in Finland it's maybe around for 20%, but it's also a system that basically almost every government or any big organization needs. And it has really been, I would say, one of the cornerstones for digitalization in Estonia. And this is also how, for example, we are currently developing also our AI solutions and facilitating that data exchange between public and private sector. But it has been used around the globe, from Namibia to Colombia. So it's one of these digital global common goods.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. I learned something. I learned a lot of things on these calls. Mark Prensky, please join us.
Hi, Nele. Thank you for that. It's been very instructive, and thank you for taking the time. We are thinking here, and of necessity, and for lots of reasons, in a relatively short term perspective. And I say relatively, I'm talking about several years, but we're trying to set these things up. I often think, because I'm so focused on young people, in a longer term perspective, let's say a 50-year perspective, let's say, when they're going to be in the middle of their lives. And one of the things that I observe is that while the world has been organized around states and cultures, so you're Finnish, and we have Singapore, and we have the US, and we have all these things, we're now in a position, with what Coco said about borderless technology, to reorganize ourselves in a sense around what might be called affinity groups. So I want to be part of Estonia not because I want to be part of that culture necessarily of speaking Estonian, but because I really am in sync with what you are doing in terms of the world cyber. And therefore, have you ever thought about this kind of reorganization that may happen? In the US, for example, we have now two countries living in one space. We have a red and a blue. Is there a way with technology that we can actually have two countries within a single space? or that those are the kinds of things that I wonder if you're thinking about for the future.
Yes, I have to admit that I haven't really thought about this from my own current sort of position, but I'm a political scientist, and being active these times when I was active as a political scientist, we were of course often discussing these issues, and it's not only something that technology facilitates, but partly because we see quite a bit more, let's say, mobile population, and that does introduce a lot of challenges to how our current states are organized. For example, Estonia, or let's say even all the neighboring countries, how our welfare system is based, how our education is based, how our healthcare is based. These may not be sustainable actually in the common actually in the very near future. We see it also in let's say happening in the Nordic countries, where the health and education expenditures really boost, whereas the taxes and everything else may not come in. So from these perspectives, yes, we have discussed, and I have also thought about this possibility of reorganizing, let's say, our state. But when we really know, I was referring to this, let's say, this borderless and this collaboration and resharing and creating together, I would say that we are still not seeing as many developments here as we actually could. And the reasons for this are very rooted somehow in how our nation states function, even though the history of current nation states is often not that long. So I believe you actually raised a lot more existential question here for all of our societies, because it's true that technology allows for many different lives and also for lives or the involvement of very many different communities in very different parts of the world. As you know, with these digital nomads is
yes, let's make it happen.
All right,
yeah.
that's great. So I'm going to ask Jack Park to join us. Jack, you're on mute right now. Let's see, perhaps he just went on camera. Hello, Jack.
Greetings. This is what an awesome topic. It's right in line with what I love, and thank you for asking me.